Who's going to challenge USC in 2023?
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Hulkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC your first listen every day. Whether you're watching on YouTube or wherever you like to download your podcast, what are we? We are free, and I really do appreciate your support. If you're watching on YouTube and you want to become a subscriber, I encourage you to become a subscriber. It's really easy. Just hit the subscribe button, and it's done. You like the episode, hit that thumbs up, and because Locked On USC comes at you 5 times a week, Monday through Friday, hit that bell notification button, and that way you'll never miss an episode. So the question was, who's going to challenge Team USC in 2023? Short answer, no one. Look, I'm doing this knowing Utah fan, and I know there's a bunch of you who enjoy watching this show. You're going to be hammering me, both hands raised in the air, acting like Horseshack trying to get Mr. Cotter's attention in the classroom. I hear you. I see you. Yes, Utah did beat USC both times in 2022. Not once, twice, including the conference championship game. And look, no one cares that it took a bunch of Pac-12 officiating screw-ups and a couple of key injuries to USC's best players, 2 of USC's better players, and that it took a late 2-point conversion to make that first loss happen in Salt Lake City. No one cares, right? And no one definitely cares that Caleb Williams on USC's 9th play of the game in the Pac-12 championship game, no one cares or gives a hoot that he took off for a 59-yard run on that 9th play and pulled up, when he ended up tearing his hamstring. Nobody cares. I mean, the fact that USC had a 17-3 lead at that point made no difference when Caleb Williams was rendered useless. Because basically, Superman without his legs, one of his superpowers, the offense stalled. And Utah went on a 44-7 run to finish off that game, winning 47-24. Now, despite Caleb playing with one hamstring, he still finished the game with 363 yards passing and 3 touchdowns, throwing the ball, and he won the Heisman a week later. But I think even Utah fan knows they got lucky when Caleb lost his mobility in that conference championship game. Because without him at full strength, USC, the team literally suffered greatly. Huge. And it put way too much pressure on an already leaky, worn-out defense. For me, look, the best way to describe USC's defense in 2022 is probably the same way Caleb described his pulled hamstring. Quote, you ever have an old rubber band? It's kind of what it felt like. And watching USC's defense, it's kind of what it looked like. Just a worn out, stretched out rubber band that had no resistance left. So that 44 part that Utah put up against USC, that 44-7 once Caleb was injured, that's going to be different in 2023. So yeah, you guessed it. I'm going to start off with Utah in my way too early. Who can challenge USC for the what everyone expects them to run away with, the Pac-12 title series? It's a long sentence, but it's my way too early. Who can challenge USC for the title that they are expected to run away with series? Utah, you're up. So, first and foremost, this year's game is going to be in the Coliseum, so advantage USC. Now, to be fair and objective, because that's who I am, that's what I do, USC will be coming off their road game in South Bend the week before. So hopefully there aren't going to be any issues stemming from that game. Excuse me. Now, Grandpa Cameron Rising, he's going to be back starting for the Utes as their quarterback. And I'm not going to lie, he's a tough son of a bitch. He's the type of player you want on your team. You don't like playing against him. Lincoln Riley loves him. But because of his style of play, he tends to get hurt a lot. So I do not want to see him injured. I hope Utah comes into the Coliseum at full strength. However, who's his backup this year? We know that USC has a really good backup in Miller Moss, and they have a future quarterback in Malachi Nelson. Who's Utah's backup to Cam Rising? Because I think it's going to be a significant drop-off, whomever it is. And yeah, there'll be a drop-off from Caleb to Miller Moss, but the transition will be much more seamless because Miller can start pretty much any program in the country. Think Alabama couldn't use Miller Moss right now? I'm just saying. So, quarterback advantage USC, even if Cameron Rising is playing in that game. And even though Cameron Rising is 2-0 against Caleb Williams. I explained partially why. Dalton Kincaid, Utah's great tight end. He's in the NFL now. Now, that said, Brant Keithy is back. He was their other tight end. He's not as big and as dynamic as Dalton Kincaid was against USC. So if Alex Grinch can find his nickelback or strong safety that can cover a tight end, USC showed that they're capable of stopping the running game. And here's where I think the difference is going to be made. I keep bringing up those 44 points and the game in Salt Lake City. USC upgraded its front seven during the offseason. And I'm going to talk more about that in the next segment, about the impact that those guys are going to make. However, getting back to what Utah brings to the game, Jaquindon Jackson is going to get the opportunity to become Utah's number one running back. And they also bring back Micah Bernard? They're kind of a 1-2 punch. Jaquindon is much bigger than Micah. And he also, if you remember Jackson, he did a little bit of that wildcat stuff in the games against USC. So he's a big running back. And USC will have his hands full. And the Utah typically always has an above-average defense with Kyle Whittingham as their coach. However, Clark Phillips and his 6 interceptions are gone to the NFL as well. So because this is really a way too early, I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds yet type of thing. This is why USC is going to win this game. And I have, my confidence level is like at 88%. I already mentioned the games in LA. I'm giving credit to Kyle Whittingham and what Utah is returning, especially Cam Rising. And I mentioned that Brant Keithy is returning at tight end, the running back, and Kyle Whittingham will always find a defense to throw out on the field. However, with all that said, this is why USC wins. Caleb Williams wants this game because of what happened in the conference championship game. Eric Gentry and the rest of the USC defense wants this game because of what happened in Salt Lake City, as well as what happened in Vegas. Bottom line, USC's defense is tired of hearing that, quote, if the defense had just ... USC would have made the playoffs. Players are going to say it all the time. They don't hear the noise. They don't read the press clippings. But they do. Trust me. I talk to them. They hear the noise. They've got this game circled. So Pac-12 Media Day is going to be in July out there in Vegas. We'll see who the voters pick. But as far as who's going to challenge USC, Utah is definitely up there. Are you looking for a delicious snack? but you don't want all the sugar and calories, then you need the best tasting protein bar ever built. You got to try this. If you're like me and you want to try and do things healthier, especially your snack choices, but you don't want to compromise on taste, I've got something for you. You got to try these things. They're called Built Bars and Built Puffs. Built Bars are so healthy and they taste amazing. Seriously, you got to try these things. And what makes Built Bars so good? Well, for one, number one, for me, priority number one, they're covered in 100% real chocolate, real dark chocolate. And they come in unbelievably great flavors like churro and peanut butter brownie and cookies and cream. And I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar. And they do it while maintaining all their amazing macros. You're gonna get 130 calories. That's it. You're only gonna get 4 grams of sugar, and you're gonna get a whopping 17 grams of protein. That's cool. And now you don't even have to wait to get a box. You don't have to order them online. If you're near a Sam's Club or a Walmart, boom, you're in luck. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can grab it, you can go in, you can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream. They have their double chocolate bar, and they have something called a coconut puff. And if you're close to Sam's Club, run on in, grab a 13-bar box. They have their hit flavors, brownie batter puff and churro puff. Tell me about them. Thank me later. On tomorrow's episode of Locked On USC, I'm going to pick a team from the North Division that could possibly challenge the Trojans. So, that's on tomorrow's episode. Continuing on this episode, USC essentially brought in a new starting defense via the transfer portal. And if they aren't going to be starting this year, they're anticipated to play major minutes. So of all the portal guys, which ones are going to have the biggest impact this year? And I'm combining last year's transfer portal guys as well as this year's. So that's the exercise. Those are the names I'm going to mention. So don't say, well, what about? I'm talking about the guys who transferred to USC through the transfer portal. This year's group, you had Jack Sullivan, Keon Bars, Anthony Lucas, Bear Alexander. That's your front 4. Then you had Christian Roland Wallace, who came in secondary. And then at the linebacker edge rush end position, Jamil Muhammad, Mason Cobb. And then last year's defensive transfer portal, the guys that are still around, Earl Barquette has moved on. Shane Lee, Eric Gentry, Bryson Shaw, Solomon Byrd, Latrell McCutcheon, Jacoby Covington, Romello Height, Tyrone Tallaney. I think that's everybody. If I missed someone, my sincere apologies. So again, for this exercise, I'm talking about just the transfer portal guys. Who will make the biggest impact in 2023? Look, Eric Gentry is thicker than he was last year. He's still as tall as he was. He still has that wingspan, but now he's thicker. He looks a little bit more like a linebacker. Mason Cobb was meant to play middle linebacker according to Brian Odom, Alex Grinch, the defensive staff. And then Shane Lee, he makes plays on the field. However, I think his biggest impact with USC is the way he sets the culture. What he brought from Alabama and what he brought to the locker room, the weight room, as well as to the practice field and in the games, that's his impact. But I think you're going to see less Shane Lee on the field with more Mason Cobb, more Eric Gentry. Prove me wrong. I will be happy to eat crow on this show. Because I hate, it almost comes off like I'm saying you're not as good as this player. And in the real world, that is what I'm saying. Trying to keep it real. But it's hard. Because you don't want to talk negatively about these guys. I think Cobb's impact will be felt immediately because now I think you're going to see him play middle linebacker. That is your Mike position. You can now start using Eric Gentry in more unique and exotic packages. You might see him starting at the weak side linebacker, but it's where he's lining up, how you're using him. I'm raising my eyebrows for those of you who are listening to the show and not watching the show. Romello Height and Solomon Byrd, these guys have some competition now from Jamil Muhammad, and I'm going to say Anthony Lucas as well, because he's been playing rush in during spring camp. Romello Height and Solomon Byrd, well, as far as Solomon Byrd, he played last year much more than Romello, but both have been dealing with nagging injuries since they've been at USC. Solomon didn't even participate during spring, and neither did Romello. Romello had off-season surgery. I'm not sure exactly what Byrd's ailment is. Now, I have said it over and over ad nauseum. It is the rush end position is an integral part of Alex Grinch's defense. So if Muhammad can lock it down, all of a sudden, you now can move Anthony Lucas inside, have him putting his hand in the dirt. So here's where I guess I'm leading up to. USC's deeper, and they're more versatile. Where was USC's defense hurt the most last year? Running up the middle against USC. You've got Keon Bars and Bear Alexander. Those two guys are anticipated to be the solution in the middle. And the way the roster is now starting to look, maybe there's more in store alignment-wise. You see, I'm having a hard time choosing which player is going to make the biggest impact. It's because the group is making the impact. The depth is making the biggest impact. Because these players that I'm talking about, I haven't even mentioned Jack Sullivan's name yet, other than I mentioned it. The roster is bigger across the board. They're more athletic. Last year, Tuli Tuipulotu not only led USC, but he led the nation with 13.5 sacks. Tyrone Taleni was second on the team with 5.5 sacks. Is Tyrone's playing time going to decrease this year because there are more players on the roster capable of playing at Tuli's level? Those players that I mentioned that came into the transfer portal this year. Jack Sullivan, Anthony Lucas, Keon Bars. Some of you might remember, and I know I mentioned it over on wearesc.com where I do a lot of my writing, and I also do my weekly Inside the Trojan Huddle podcast, which everybody should check out. I said Tyrone Taleni was going to lead USC in sacks this year. That was before Bear Alexander showed up, Keon Bars, Jack Sullivan, before all these changes came about. So the impact is USC now is deeper. They're better on defense. If you're going to put a gun to my head and say, Mark, pick one player that's going to have the biggest impact out of the transfer portal group. Okay, Bear Alexander. Again, because of the experience he brings from Georgia playing in a national championship game. He is a SEC, I'm using finger quotes, body type that you need on your defensive line. So, we're going to address this situation, this topic, many more times between now and the end of fall camp. However, we're getting started with different position groups, players that are going to impact 2023. And everybody knows that it is on the defensive side of the ball where that impact needs to be felt the most. Okay, if you're the Arizona Cardinals and you just happen to have the first overall draft pick in the 2024 draft, who are you taking? This isn't a trick question. Kyler Murray is their quarterback now. His ex-head coach, is now at USC, helping last year's Heisman winner, Caleb Williams, become 2024's anticipated first overall draft pick. Now, like I said, Caleb Williams is going to be the number one guy available in 2024. However, apparently there's another name we're going to throw into the mix here. Marvin Harrison Jr. Okay? Should the Cardinals pull a Keyshawn Johnson and make Marvin Harrison Jr. the number one overall draft choice? The thought, you got Kyler Murray, Heisman winner, pretty good quarterback in his own right. The reason I'm bringing the subject up, there are a lot of USC haters out there. And then there are those that pretend they're trying to be objective. Take Joel Klatt, for instance. I like Joel. I enjoy listening to him when he's calling a game. He breaks things down really well. He understands the game. I'm not a Joel Klatt hater. However, I will say this. I think he has some lingering bad memories that swirl around in his dome from his time playing quarterback at Colorado, or at least when he was on the bench watching USC beat his Colorado team. If you're not aware of this, Joel Klatt attended the University of Colorado. He is a Colorado native. He went to high school out there. His dad was his coach. USC is 16-0 all-time against Ralphie U, including that 40-3 beatdown in 2002 when Joel was on Colorado's roster. Anyways, now that I've set that up for you, this is what Joel Klatt said Monday, this week, after the draft that just completed. He went with Ohio State wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. as his top prospect in next year's draft. He said his combination of skill set, impact, and bloodline has helped make him the best player in college football. Let me repeat that. The best player in college football. In turn, they will also be what puts him atop his way too early draft board heading into next spring. That's who Joel has. Quote, the best player next year is Marvin Harrison Jr., said Klatt. This dude is the best wide receiver I've seen in college since Randy Moss. Okay. He does everything well. He's like his dad in a baby Julio Jones body. Runs great routes, catches it better than anybody, got outstanding body control. It's insanity, end quote. The space he creates, the ability to win, to be physical, he's the best player in football, end quote. Marvin Harrison Jr. is my number one prospect for next year because he's the best player. Okay. Dramatic pause. I want to hang out with Joel. I want to see what he's smoking up there in Boulder, Colorado, because that dude is stoned to the bone right now. Look, Marvin Harrison Jr., outstanding talent, tremendous talent. I understand taking him in the top 5 picks. But you do not choose him over Caleb Williams. even if you're Arizona. Period. End of story. Thread. / / whatever it is. Caleb Williams is a generational player. They're comparing him to a more refined, better Patrick Mahomes at this stage of their careers. Imagine Caleb Williams 3 to 5 years from now. That's what you're drafting. Marvin Harrison isn't going to get much more better than he already is. Caleb Williams is still tapping his talent. So, who are you picking? Now, again, if you're Philadelphia, you've got Jalen Hurts. You're not picking number 1 overall. If you're Cincinnati, you got Joe Burrows. You're not picking number 1 overall. Josh Allen, you're not picking number 1 overall. See where I'm going with this? Arizona, they have a decision to make. They could possibly be picking number 1 overall next year. Give me your comments. Tell me what you think. All right. Again, on next episode of Locked On USC, we're going to talk about some team, maybe 1 or 2 teams that can challenge USC in 2023. And much, much more. I've always got something to talk about. It's easy for me to ramble. Anyways, I hope everyone enjoyed this episode. Until our next episode of Locked On USC, when you're not making it your first listen, you're heading on over to wearesc.com. There's a ton of recruiting information coming along. Scott Schrader and Eric McKinney. And we got a new guy named Marshall Levinson. They're dropping stuff left and right. Take advantage of our subscription special, $29.99, all the way through August 31st, or $9.99 a month. Otherwise, you come here, Locked On USC, your first listen every day. It's free. And until our next episode, everyone, you know what to do.